Thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon. To all of you who have registered, it is just great to welcome you all from across higher education, government and enterprise. My name is Ella McSweeney and I'm delighted to be your host for the next hour, where we're going to learn more and discuss the EPA-IUA Campus Living Labs project. The first time IUA universities have worked together to embed circular economy principles in campus operations. We're going to hear first from our guest speakers and then have a chance with our panelists to discuss how universities can create structures to support better sustainable practices and how projects like Campus Living Labs can drive this change. So we have ahead of us an hour of interest and discussion. You can see there our panelists. So we're going to ask them all to wave and say hello. And we will be joining them shortly. I hope that you also watching will have some questions and you'll use the opportunity to put any of your questions to our panelists. You know how to do that on Zoom. There's also closed captioning. We have it available here, so all of you can alter the size of the captions. Just click on that CC button at the bottom of your screen. And just to remind you all as well that we are recording this session. It will be available on iua.ie tomorrow. So to start, unfortunately, Minister Ushant Smith is unable to join us today. He sends his apologies, but we are delighted to welcome Catherine Higgins, Assistant Principal in the Circular Economy Division in the Department of Environment, Climate and Communications, who is joining us to provide some insight into how the government is supporting the transition to a circular economy. So I'm delighted to pass the baton over now to Catherine.
Thank you so much, Ella, and good morning, everyone. Actually, good afternoon at this stage. And firstly, before I start, I just want to extend Minister Smith's apologies. He asked me to apologise to everyone that he can't be here with us this morning. It was unavoidable. He was called away, but the department has been involved in this project since the beginning. He's been very, very well aware of the progress that's been made, and he's really very sorry to miss the event. So I just want to pass that on to everyone, and hopefully we will get a chance to meet him at events like this in the future. So I suppose, firstly, from the point of view of government and government policy, I think we're all agreed the linear economic model of take, make, waste. It's environmentally and economically unsustainable. That's why the transition to a circular economy offers an alternative. It's a pathway to sustainability. So in a circular economy, waste and resource use is minimized and the value of products and materials is maintained for as long as possible. In a circular economy, when a product has reached the end of its life, its parts can then be used again and again to create further useful products. So by making that transition to a circular economy, we move away from what we're currently doing, managing and disposing of waste, towards preserving resources and limiting our consumption. Meeting our climate targets also requires a transformation in the way we produce and use goods. So making less, or making with fewer resources and consuming less, plays a key role in climate action and reducing our carbon emissions. So that's hugely important. In terms of the role of government, what we need to make sure of is that our policy and regulatory framework gives support for people who want to make that circular transition. So that's not just in terms of direct funding, but through funding for research and innovation, and that's hugely important. And national partnership projects like the Campus Living Labs project, which has had the participation of the IUA, its member universities, the EPA, and our own department here, that's hugely important to making the circular transition. And we are making progress. We're making progress towards that circular transition at a national level and also at an EU level. Ireland's first circular economy strategy and the EPA's circular economy programme were published in December 2021. And in July 2022, the Circular Economy Act completed its passage through the Oireachtas. And that was a huge achievement. It's the first time that the term circular economy has ever been on the statute book, which was a huge milestone. It was a completely new term. So something like the Circular Economy Act and getting that term out in public has a huge effect on people and on their awareness of what circular economy is. So after the past 2 years really has seen the government put in place a policy and regulatory framework that will require for a circular transition. But that framework is in place. We have to continue to build on the momentum. We can't just say we have a framework and then not do anything. We have to continue and build on that momentum. So our first National Food Waste Prevention Roadmap, as was published last November, that's a key step in steering efforts towards achieving the goal of reducing food waste by 50%, which is a very significant target by 2030. The new Circular Economy Fund was established in July this year, and that will be used to fund circular economy projects and environmental projects. And July also saw the introduction of incentivised waste collection in the commercial sector. And up to now, that had only been used in the household sector. So that was a huge achievement. From the 1st of September this year, a new waste recovery levy has been introduced for every tonne of municipal waste recovered in Ireland or exported abroad, which is also important. And there were corresponding increases in the landfill levy, which is in operation already for a number of years. The Circular Economy Act that I mentioned earlier provides for the introduction of levies on single-use items, including single-use packaging, disposable cups such as coffee cups, and it's planned to introduce those levies shortly. And I think what's probably key to remember here is while they are levies and they do raise revenue, that's not really their purpose. Their purpose is to affect and encourage behavioural change, to, I suppose, promote increased use of recycling, for people to reuse, and to promote greater efforts to segregate waste at source. That is the real purpose of those levies, similar to the plastic bag levy, which has worked very well in that regard. And I suppose at this point, I think it's probably really useful and interesting to call out some of the projects that were developed or supported through the Campus Living Labs project over the past 2 years. They've supported a national circular economy policy, and I think they really will have an enduring legacy within university campuses. They're really interesting projects. So, for example, the findings from behavioural science-led projects like UCD's reusable cup trial, this kind of insight has huge potential, I think, to inform policy development and to ensure that policies actually achieve their objective, that they're not just designed within a department in a silo-like environment, that there's real-world experience there informing that policy design. So that's really important. UCC is creating a plastic-free university campus, an initiative that's not only reducing plastic waste, but also raising awareness within the campus population of the need to move away from a linear to a circular economy. Similarly, the work the DCU is doing to maintain a zero waste to landfill campus has a focus on consistent messaging around waste segregation across the 3 waste bin types. So these are really key projects. The University of Galway, for example, their Glassary project, that demonstrates what can be achieved when staff and students work together to deliver opportunities for reuse of household items within student accommodation. And I think reuse and repair activity, it's one of those things that's really central to circular economy, to the definition of circular economy and what circular economy is all about. It keeps products and materials in the economy for longer, and that's exactly what we need to do. And I think the EPA's behavioural insight studies have shown that there really is an appetite within the population. People want this, they want to increase their repair skills. So as part of the Campus Living project, there was a collaboration between the Rediscovery Centre and the University of Limerick on developing textile repair skills. And I think this is a really good example of how repair skills can be developed within the student population. And we can upscale this kind of project and deliver it for society as a whole. University campuses also provide a really great opportunity to reduce food waste, which will support the National Food Waste Prevention Roadmap, which I mentioned earlier, and climate action. And I know Maynooth University and TU Dublin were both involved in food waste prevention projects that were really successful. And finally, the Campus Living Labs, the online quiz, The Waste Game, which I found really interesting, was developed. And I know TCD were one of 4 universities that trialed that quiz and got some really significant insights from that. So I think it's really clear through this project, and what this project has really shown is the potential of the higher education sector to play a leading role in the transition to a circular economy. And like I said earlier, we're making progress, but there are still lots of things that we need to do and that we can do to further that ambition. We're working at the moment on the next iteration of the Circular Economy Strategy, which will be made under the Circular Economy Act. This next version will have targets for reuse, targets for recycling, and it will have sector-specific targets. So that's really going to be a very important document, and will have real potential to make a significant contribution. Their work is also continuing at the moment on a new green public procurement strategy, and that's going to replace the current national policy, green tenders. So for anyone that's aware of green tenders, it's now more than 10 years old. And my department, the Department of Environment, is currently developing a new draft strategy and action plan, which when finalised will replace that green tenders document. And I think the higher education sector has a really significant potential to make an impact via GPP. For example, I was reading one of the recommendations of the bulky item reuse workshops that were carried out by the IUA and the Community Resources Network. One of the recommendations of that project is that procurement policies should provide that bulky items are reused before new items are purchased. And given the size of the higher education sector, I think policies like this and procurement policies like this can have a real impact on the circular transition. So the draft GPP strategy and the action plan, it's currently available for public consultation. That consultation closes on the 10th of November. And I really would encourage everyone here, if you have time, to download the document, read the draft, and make a submission before the closing date. We'd really love to hear the views from the higher education sector. And I think just looking at the projects that have been carried out recently, I think you could really make a very significant contribution there. So February next year, I think people may have already seen some of these machines coming into your local supermarkets and stores. You will see the introduction of Ireland's deposit return scheme for plastic bottles and aluminium cans. So this is a really exciting project. It's been in development for the last 3 years, and it's been a major undertaking for the beverage industry, retailers, and the DRS company Return. It's the first system across Britain and Ireland, and I think it's really a really good example of how we can embrace circularity in our everyday lives. 2024 will also see the delivery of 2 other key circular economy projects. The first is the delivery of a national circular economy platform to provide an authoritative source of information about the circular economy. And I think it's really important, if we're trying to affect real behavioural change, then we have to raise awareness of circular economy practices and what circular economy is in society in general. So projects like the Waste Game, they show the importance of education and awareness in achieving a circular economy. And I think the establishment of a circular economy platform will play a key role in achieving that objective. The establishment of a centre of excellence for circular manufacturing and innovation is also a priority. And I think it's really key that we continue to support research and innovation. And I think the EPA support for projects like Campus Living Labs plays a really key role in that and supporting the transition. So in conclusion, I think we've made really significant progress in moving to a circular economy in the last 2 years. But it's really important that we continue to harness the momentum if we're going to affect real change. Ireland's ambition is to be an EU leader, a global leader in the transition, a transition that's going to have positive environmental, economic, social impacts for everyone. It offers the possibility of an alternative, sustainable future, and it really is a fundamental step towards achieving our climate targets. It can really make a significant contribution to achieving those targets. So through increased awareness, better informed consumption decisions, and appropriate incentives, I think Ireland can become a leader in this field and deliver benefits across all sectors of society. And what Campus Living Labs has clearly demonstrated, I think, is that the higher education sector is a fundamental part of this. It's demonstrated it as a source of new ideas, innovative thinking, the potential to be a living lab, to trial interventions to support circular economy ambition. And that potential can have a significant impact across society as a whole. So from research and innovation to awareness raising, education and skills development, the higher education sector, I think, could be a key enabler for the circular transition. And finally, I just want to congratulate both the EPA and the IUA on the work completed on this project. I think it's been fantastic. There have been some amazing insights that I think can feed into policy and regulatory design. I think it's been really worthwhile, and I really would like to extend the congratulations of the Minister and the Department to you on that work. Once again, I'm sorry I had a prior commitment. I can't stay for the panel discussion, but I know it's going to be really interesting, and I'd just like to wish all of you the very best of luck. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. And sorry, I can't start my video there without the host allowing me to do that. Leah, you might let me start my video one more time. Catherine, thank you very, very much for that. And I'm delighted now to introduce Samantha Fahy, who is the Head of Sustainability in Dublin City University, as well as leading the establishment of the DCU Sustainability Council and the Irish Universities Association Sustainability Working Group. Samantha has driven DCU's first climate action plan in 2021 and the climate action roadmap in 2023, delivering numerous pioneering programs across the institution. And her work has gained DCU a top 20 position in the international UI Green Metrics rankings for the last 6 years and successfully retained DCU's Green Campus status under the An Taisce International Foundation for Environmental Education program. Samantha is going to present the findings, the learnings, the impacts, and the next steps arising from the collective efforts of everyone involved in the Campus Living Labs projects. And I'm also delighted to say that after she speaks, she will be joining our panel discussion as well. But I'm going to hand it over to you now, Samantha.
Okay, thank you very much, Ella. And thank you very much to the IUA for inviting me to speak at this. I'll start with echoing Catherine's, what she said about the higher education sector being leaders. I think there is fantastic opportunity for the higher education to not just demonstrate the leadership by walking the walk, but we are teaching the next set of generations that are going to be working for the next 40, 50 years of their lives. So we need to be demonstrating that so that we can help them understand the scale of change for this really unscripted future that we're all facing to. So as Ella said, I'm going to give a quick overview of what went on with the Campus Living Labs. And I guess going back to where it originally started, I was just looking up this before I started talking, and the first meeting on this happened actually in April 2019, when Mary Frances Rushford from the EPA and Kevin O'Donovan from the department came out to DCU to have a chat with Brie McCraw and myself about how we could do a pilot project to use the microcosms that are within university campuses to demonstrate better waste prevention and stuff like that. And we had a really long discussion at DCU, and we had just at that time set up the IUA's Sustainability Working Group. And so the thought was that rather than having this incremental change within a single organization, was there some way that we could scale that to a bigger system-wide change so that we could move it to the entire IUA sector? And so then we went and we talked with the IUA and looked about bringing about this living lab, Campus Living Labs. And it took us 2 years because it wasn't until April 2021 that we started this partnership between the EPA and the IUA to look at how we bring together the campuses, and they're pretty much like a city. So DCU, for instance, has got the population of Kilkenny, but we arrive every morning and leave every evening. We've got accommodation on campus, we've got shops, we've got restaurants, and there's lots of other functionality that's going along all over the place that can emulate what a city is. So the idea of this was, could we look at demonstrating practices, co-creating them and demonstrating them on campuses, and then potentially making them replicable out into cities to help them. So the idea was, how do we help the campuses first and then look for that system change out into the wider community? And I guess what I really liked about it was this. It was a cross-sectoral co-creation of the solutions. So it was looking at how we were going to do things together rather than actually each of us wasting resources and developing these individually. So it was bringing together all the different factors. All of the 8 universities came and were involved in it. So one of the first resources that was created as part of it, and working with the behavioralists, which were a behavioral change company, which I guess brought in an awful lot of other insights, was the development of this waste game, which was an online tool that had lots of input from lots of different organizations in all of the IUA universities, but also the mywaste.ie and the regional waste authorities, to come up with a tool that could be circulated to all students, all staff across all of the institutions to help them understand where their waste should go. So it's raising that levels of awareness. And we would have known at DCU how poorly we were actually segregating our waste. So when it was separated, so our paper waste was absolutely fine because that didn't come into the general waste system. But in the general public realm, we were not particularly good at segregating our waste. And an awful lot of it from surveys was, what was the big factors? A lot of it was consistent messaging, so ensuring that we had the same signage from one end of it to the other. But this tool was something that was replicable across all of our institutions. So it was a tool that could be used everywhere to look at that systematic way in which people can deal with their waste. So some of the really interesting insights that came from it were that people so we started with a much more complicated version and then simplified it down. And apparently, looking at all the data afterwards, the more simplified version was much more effective and engaging about engaging people. So we don't have to make really complicated solutions to try and help people. We need to keep it simple and straightforward. Most of the students and staff that were involved in the game found it useful at the topics that were addressed across the game. It was mostly, and I guess this is proven out in an awful lot of the psychology literature, that it was mostly female students that were demonstrating that pro-environmental behavior. Interesting to look at, why that's the case and how we can translate that to a broader gender base. The things that were, or the items that were creating the most issues for people were Pringle tubes, disposable coffee cups, and packets of crisps, as in, where do they go? Which bin do they go into? And coffee cups for me are particularly one of these things that create huge difficulties because they can have all the little signs on them, but where do they go? Do they go into the compost bin? Do they go into the recycle bin, or do they go into the general waste bin? And one of the most interesting things that I got out of this is that if you don't know where it goes, you put it in the general waste bin, because the most thing you don't want to do is contaminate your recycling streams. So trying to encourage people, if you don't know where it goes, put it in the general waste is probably one of the key learnings that I got out of this. So there was lots of different different schemes that were run, different projects that were run across all the universities, and they weren't just run in one. So all of the universities are using some form of reusable cup. But we took the one that was being deployed at UCD because it was looking at a new way of doing it. So there was some of these discounts and promotional schemes to help people, or at least trial and see whether people would create those more sustainable habits. And so this cup had an app that was associated with it, and you got rewards if you used your cup multiple times. But I guess some of the things with doing stuff in research is finding out what doesn't work as much as what does work. So it found that the discounts were ineffective at promoting the reusable cups. And the e-cup scheme and the mobile apps did not provide additional motivation for users to use reusable cups. Now, we're going to have to move this way. And, fair dues to our government for the mandate for them, at least the public sector bodies, that mandates all public sector bodies now to get rid of all single-use stuff, because of course the easiest way to get this to implement is to say, well, you can't have a single-use cup in the first instance, which makes people much more engaged at remembering to bring in their cups, their reusable cups. And so there's lots of other models that are out there looking at how these things work. Another part was part of the project was looking and engaging with the Rediscovery Centre and looking at bike repair workshops. And so I think a lot of the organizations have been running, Limerick certainly has for years been running cycle maintenance clinics and cycle clinics for people to bring along their bikes and get them fixed for free. And DCU has equally been doing the same thing. And I think so has UCD, and lots of the institutions have been doing this. But this was a specific one targeting bike repair workshops. Went around with the Rediscovery Centre, and Mark in the middle there in the first picture in Trinity College from the Rediscovery Centre went around and helped people understand how to best upcycle or how to best repair their bikes. Then we also, with the Rediscovery Centre, looked at textile and repair workshops. And I guess fast fashion is a significant discussion point in the media at the moment, and particularly within the cohort that is within universities. They're very fashion focused and very social media focused, and the concept out there at the moment that if you're caught 3 times on social media with the same top on, that somehow that there's a shaming associated with that is something that we are really trying to change, and looking at different methods for looking at these textile repairs or upcycling, swapping of clothes across the student bodies is something that is going on probably across all of the higher educations. And it is something that we're doing together and sharing best practice to go, well, how did it work there and which way does it work best? So aligning stuff like these textile repair workshops with swap shops, so that if you get a dress, and really I only like the bottom half of that dress and not the top half, that you're shown how to undo them and create the hem or the waistband on the new one. So these workshops were looking at how to take up a hem, how to patch a hole in your trousers, and looking at darning and just different methodologies that have been completely lost at this stage. Also did workshops with the Community Resource Network of Ireland. And so these were literally going around to all of the different universities and talking about, a lot of it was about the bulky waste, looking at how much bulky waste we had and what we could be doing on campus. But one of the things that I think about when I look at something like this is the word resource. And it's not just, it's nearly two words in one. So it's and source. And what I think we fail to think about a lot of the time is the source of where we're getting our resources from, and how, as at least the public sector bodies and the higher education institutions, we need to be very conscious that this is not just a climate change, but a biodiversity crisis, and that the natural world is where we're getting most of our resources from. And this overconsumption of resources is having a detrimental impact. And so the implementation of that circular economy concept, that we don't keep pulling from the finite resources of the earth and actually try to upcycle, recycle, and reuse, and in an awful lot of ways reduce consumption levels by doing that, is a huge part of what this project demonstrated. It was that this is something that can be collaboratively across the organization, something that we can come together to demonstrate. We were also then looking at some of the other resources that came out of the end of it were these Campus Living Lab video series. So we had, each campus came up with a theme, and while Catherine spoke about them being themed for individual institutions, most of the projects were actually multiple located across the different institutions. So several organizations, several institutions would have taken on each project and run them. But we did a video clip at the end to try and summarize them all based from each institution. So each institution ended up with an asset so that they could demonstrate something that they really took from the collaboration. And these are available to all of the institutions as well. And I guess just for a little summary, so what worked and why? And I guess what worked for me was that, you can get universities to work together and to share their problems, their experiences, and the best practice and policies. And what was huge about that is the amount of resources we saved by not reinventing wheels, by actually going, okay, this is how we can look at all of our problems, but look at not just the incremental change that we would do locally, but how do we go to a system-wide, sector-wide change to raise all boats? Because in a way, there's no first mover advantage in becoming a sustainable institution. So if, for instance, any university was to become sustainable in the morning, they more than likely would go out of business because the competition from all of the other institutions would completely outweigh them. So what we need to do is look at how we do need to work together to look at all of the aspects that are leading us to how we deliver the best education we can within those planetary boundaries or within those carbon budgets that we are actually being asked to do. And I guess as higher education institutions, we must lead on that. We need to provide the support and the courage to government, to our cities, to our local authorities, to help them actually make the changes that are necessary. We need to make sure that we have the appropriate legislations and regulations and that those are implemented, and that we don't somehow backtrack when it really starts to get difficult. But then we also need to engage with our enterprise and our societal partners, because we need to bring all of those with us on this journey to a more sustainable future. So while we are communicating the scale of the challenge to them, and that it's not challenges that are going to, the challenges for climate and biodiversity are not going to be getting any less, there is a huge potential for us to identify and implement the nature-based, the technology, or the behavioral change solutions, because we will need all of these solutions, every single one of them, to actually deliver what we need. But the idea of us doing it together means that it is creating this kind of level playing field, a sustainable level playing field that we raise all boats to, that we don't compete on sustainability anymore, that it is literally something that is an accepted base that we would work on, and that everybody would go forward from. And I guess that's what I see as the best that came out of this project, was this demonstration that that collaboration has a huge impact and can have a huge influence on where we want to go. And I guess I might finish there, in that what's next for the Campus Living Labs is potentially something that we could discuss in the panel session. And so I will stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Samantha. And I know you're going to stay on for the panel discussion now. To all our guests watching, please put any questions you have in the Q&A box below, and take this time to put any thoughts or questions or comments that you have to our panelists. But I'm now going to introduce our other panelists. You will see them there. So we have Samantha. We also have Warren Phelan, who is the program manager of the EPA's Circular Economy program. He is a chartered civil engineer and chartered waste manager, and has spent over 20 years working in the waste and resources industry before joining the EPA last year. And Warren is the EPA's representative on the Construction Sector Group Sustainability Consultative Committee. And we're also joined in UCD by Professor Tasman Crowe, who is Vice President for Sustainability at UCD. His academic background is in zoology and marine ecology. He joined UCD back in 2001 as a member of what is now the School of Biology and Environmental Science. He served as Director of the UCD Earth Institute, Associate Dean of Science, Chair of the Liberal Arts and Science Programme Board, and co-founded UCD's Bachelor of Science in Sustainability. So I'm very delighted to have you all for the discussion, which we will run for the next half an hour or so. Warren, I suppose coming first to you, it was a 2-year collaborative project between the EPA and the IUA. Can you talk a little bit about the key takeaways that the EPA took from the collaboration and what you learned?
Thanks, Ella. Yes, so yeah, 2-year project with the EPA we're delighted to be involved in. Some of the key takeaways for us was the real opportunity that IUA members have to lead in the transformation that's needed, not just on their own campuses, but in society, and the opportunity that they have, probably slightly ahead of other, cities and towns and local authorities, to really think big and to actually implement and drive through those kind of interventions that quicker than others. One of the other takeaways we took is that the IUA members are at different stages on their journey, whether that's the decarbonisation or the sustainability journey, and the real importance of sharing that's been mentioned a number of times today. And it was great that Campus Living Labs provided that forum for members to come together, and really taking that forward is what the IUA has to think about, so that I suppose the good work in establishing that network continues on, and it's really important that's developed. The other important thing is really about the buy-in and the commitment to decarbonisation and sustainability, and really where that lands in terms of the senior management and the organizations, in terms of delivering what's needed on the ground. That's a really important thing that we need to consider. One of the other things from the trials that were mentioned there today was that universities really need to give a lot of thought and time to how accessible and easy the interventions are for the students to take these up. So I think we learned a lot from, we were mentioned there, the waste game and the reusable try and around the coffee cups. There's an ongoing need for information and awareness to student bodies and staff in terms of not just about changes, but also about the practicalities in terms of waste that's been highlighted and how to prevent waste, but also in terms of new interventions that we're making. These are really only going to succeed if they're accessible, if they're easy, and if we can normalize them. So that's something to really think about, and some of the learnings we took from the usable intervention, a usable coffee cup intervention was very telling in that. And maybe two other things just to mention was the demand from the student body in terms of practical life skills. So we saw that in our workshops around repair, and that really is something to consider how that can be built upon. These workshops demonstrate that there is an appetite for that, and I think we should think about how we can actually give these skills to student bodies that they take forward into their lives after they leave campuses, and it just becomes part of who they are and what they do. And the last thing is really about measurement and the importance about measuring where we're currently at on campuses. So part of the work that we did was measuring, say, for example, around food and food waste in particular, and really we can't really start delivering the change if we know until we know what the baseline of where we're currently at. So that's an important step, that universities invest the time to actually measure, capture the data to show where they're currently at in terms of waste and the circular economy.
You mentioned there, Warren, the point about the buy-in by the managers. Can you just briefly expand on that a little bit? What needs to happen there? I mean, is there a job of work to be done?
No, I think all of the IUA members have plans in place. And I think really in order for, I suppose, the rubber to hit the road, it's really about the implementation and delivery and the follow through on that. And I suppose the best plans are those that get executed and we deliver on the targets and the ambition that we've set down. So it's about that continual focus to ensure that sustainability, circular economy, climate is part of the discussion at all levels in terms of, the future role of universities.
Samantha, can I bring you in there? From your perspective, the kind of key learnings, I mean, it seems from what you said that doing things together saves so many resources. And that is the key thing here, is to make sure that this is not some sort of singular project. It is about working together.
Yeah, I guess I would echo an awful lot about what Warren was saying, but that collaboration part, given the scale of the challenge, whether it is a circular economy challenge to deliver that, whether it is the climate challenge, the climate breakdown, the biodiversity loss, these are all significant challenges and they're not going anywhere. They are only going to get greater. And so therefore there is this ever evolving science and ever evolving and getting more dangerous challenges that are ahead for us and for this generation of students that are coming through our institutions. So not working together at this stage to really consolidate resources. We are only small if we look at ourselves as there's only 8 universities within the IUA. But the amount of impact that we can have, if we can bring all of those, I mean, the knowledge and the education that we have within that, within those institutions is just phenomenal to deliver the solutions. And we are going to have to. I would agree with Warren, we do have significant buy-in from senior management at this stage, not least supported by the fact that our climate action mandates now requires all of our senior managers to have climate action leadership training, which helps a lot. But also that does filter down. That does filter down to the next levels and the managers who are looking to go, well, what will I do with my bulky waste? Well, will I ring up my colleagues in other institutions and see if they want it, or is there something else that we can do with this? But I really like the measurement bit as well, that we do have to keep that measurement bit going. And it's really important that we know where our impacts are, because if we don't know where our impacts are, then we're investing in solutions that may not be having the best impact for us. So looking at a bigger picture and that more holistic picture is really important, rather than just trying to target down on, for instance, just energy or just one aspect of the other. We need to pull back as higher education institutions, go, can we see our bigger picture and look at where we can have our best impact? So a lot of the stuff on waste, really important to deal with waste, but what we have to do is deal with our procurement side. And I really liked what Catherine had to say about green public procurement and how we really need to tackle not buying the stuff in the first place, because dealing with the waste is much easier if you don't have it. But all of that is, for me, bringing together all of this expertise across the sector to actually deliver on it is our only way forward. It's our only sensible way forward to actually deal with the scale of the challenge that we faced.
Thank you. And Tasman, as Samantha said in her talk, universities need to bring forward the next generation of people who will continue this change. We know from the OECD's recent report on Ireland's skills strategy, the green transition will transform the types of skills required. I just wonder, from your perspective, what role universities play in supporting this essential pipeline of talent and skills that are required to move rapidly, as Samantha has said a few times, to a circular economy.
Thanks, Ella. Yes, no, absolutely. I think universities and other educational institutions really need to ensure there's a diversity, and especially that rapid piece requires there to be kind of flexible online courses and micro-credentials for professionals, as well as building kind of new innovative undergraduate and postgraduate degree programs that combine the relevant knowledge and skills from across disciplines. That's where the challenge comes in. A lot of education tends to be within disciplinary silos, and I think we need to break that down so that the next generation of graduates understand the interplay between the environmental, the societal, the economic and governance dimensions of sustainability. So you really need people that have that broader view and understand how to work in interdisciplinary teams. And you know, that the sustainability program that you mentioned tries to do this, and it's really resonating very strongly with students and indeed with prospective employers who are also very keen, you know, to be adopting more sustainable approaches, and they are looking to universities and graduates for the answers to help them address these complicated and difficult challenges. And the other kind of thread that I'd just like to highlight again in the context of this discussion is, of course, giving students exposure to and experiences in green innovations like the ones we've been hearing about with the reusable cups and the waste game and so on, so that they're familiarized with that idea that we really need to be changing the way that we're thinking and operating and thinking about how they can contribute as well.
And just on that, Tasman, we have a question here. Thank you, Jack, for your question. He says, it seems difficult at times to engage with students who aren't already interested in sustainability, what he calls the usual suspects. Are there any thoughts on how to get students interested and engaged in sustainability who are currently unaware or inactive in that space? I mean, we talk about pipelines. There's obviously also a pipeline coming from the schools and obviously people's families as well. There is the Irish School Sustainability Network that's trying to address a certain amount of that. But Tasman, at the university level, do you have any thoughts on that question? It's not an easy one.
No, it's a tricky one, and I do think that it's a very apt and important question, because I think, you know, we really do need to get the message out as widely as we can, and people to buy in to that message, and just kind of, you know, that's part of what we're going to try to do, I'm sure, going forward, is to try to embed sustainability across all the offerings that universities deliver. You know, so that there's someone speaking directly to students about this at an early stage in their program and giving them opportunities to engage throughout. But I guess one of my kind of gradual realizations through interdisciplinary work, I guess, is that people are more often moved by their hearts than their heads. So sometimes quoting facts and figures about, you know, contaminant levels and pollution and climate change, you know, it speaks to some of us, but not to all of us. I think so. The emotional hook and, you know, kind of the involvement of the humanities to better understand how people are kind of engaging culturally with these ideas, I think, can help to shape the kind of communication that we need to establish going forward, to bring a wider constituency with us, I guess.
And Warren, that last point goes to the general sense that has been mentioned here already of the difficulty of silos, and just that silo thinking is never going to get us anywhere in this space.
No, and maybe just to add to that, and thanks for the question, I think that we do have to recognize that, you know, we have different target audience and different motivators for those particular target audience. And going back to the point that I made about interventions really do need to be, you know, they need to be accessible, they need to be easy, and we need to really consider things like, you know, we need to make it in certain instances more expensive to do the wrong thing. So if we go back to that reusable coffee cup, and I know we probably spent too much time talking about coffee cups in Ireland, it just kind of shows us where our consumption habits are and what we think about. But, you know, if we're going to go to a plastic free or disposable free environments, we know that lots of students and staff drink lots of coffee every single day. What are the options then available for people? If we've made the decision that the single use won't be available on campuses, we have to give people the alternative, so they can buy a permanent cup or they can have a deposit refund scheme that's there. The deposit refund scheme really means that you're going to pay extra for that convenience of having that cup. So but it's at least the alternatives are there for people, and you start to bring a wider cohort with you then, because because the question is right in that we have a certain, probably a small percentage of people who will follow you in relation to these sustainability or circular economy interventions. You have a much larger group that are probably sitting on the fence and could be persuaded. And then you have a smaller group again who are never going to be persuaded. And we really need to win both the hearts, the minds, the pockets of that middle group so that they can come with us and build a momentum.
Samantha, I mean, I just wonder how much the concept of the circular economy is widely understood outside of the institutions and just in Ireland amongst the general public, because obviously people don't live in these, silos themselves. They live in society. And is there a job of work to be done there?
I think there is, but just one point on that previous point about our next generations and bringing the hearts and minds with it. There was a recent paper in the psychology publication, some psychology paper that was published, but it showed the motivating factors about what helps people to move towards more pro-environmental behavior. And actually looking at your social norms, looking at your social contemporaries and who is with you, whether that be organizationally or personally, that is 3 times more impactful. If they are demonstrating sustainable behaviors, it's 3 times more impactful than education on its own. And it's even more impactful than financial incentives. So the universities showing leadership by demonstrating, by walking that walk and showing that they are going to do stuff that is going to be more sustainable will equally have a fantastic impact on that next generation and making all of that system change. On the circular economy, so I guess because we live very close to the Rediscovery Centre, we're very much linked with the Centre for the Circular Economy, and it would be quite highlighted across the university. There is an awful lot more work that needs to be done on educating people as to how we're going to get it. But I don't think it's not a difficult concept. It is something that, not all that long ago we would have been doing as automatic practice. So it is just a matter of how do we communicate that message that it is both, and I've been told from a psychology perspective that you can't have internal and external motivations in the one thing. So you can't tell people that they're going to save money and the planet in the one conversation. But there are, we'll say, us working with people like fast fashion, working with the swap shop, and how that makes a significant impact for students on the amount of money they need to ensure that they have got a wardrobe that they can feel happy about going out in an evening, is an easy way to embed a principle of the circular economy into what these students are doing.
Warren, I might bring you in there with regard to the question rather, of the concept of the circular economy, whether it's widely understood. Do you have research in the EPA to talk about there?
Yeah, there was specific research about the understanding of the term and the awareness about that. And it was a quick barometer survey, and it showed the first time it was done, it was in the low 20s, and then it's moved now to the maybe low 40s. So I suppose the term is being socialized more. But if we look at other behavioral surveys, we have a behavioral insights program within the circular economy program, and we've looked at different materials, plastics, food, repair activities. We also in the EPA have looked at climate change. And what we see is that, Irish people generally are very well informed when it comes to climate and environment and these types of issues. Action can be a different thing. We are very concerned, but again, coming back to that, in terms of that transition and change implementation, there can be a lot of frustration there coming through in terms of people wanting to act but feeling an inability to act. I think coverage in terms of the word in the mainstream media has certainly picked up for circular economy. It's now finding its feet and finding its place alongside things like climate. But if there's lots of coverage being given to climate and climate change and climate mitigations, I think what we need to start actually vocalizing more is that circular economy is a climate mitigation step. And it's very much, if you're trying to achieve transformation around climate and sustainability, circular economy is really going to support that. And that link needs to be much better made now, and so there's a clear link between the two, that these are not separate they're not separate strategies. They're very, very integrated. And in fact, circular economy will deliver very significantly on emissions reductions.
And I just see there, thank you, Fiona. Fiona McCool has just posted that the Department of Environment is currently running a national communications campaign on the circular economy, with radio ads, social media, to raise exactly that kind of awareness. Tasman, can I ask you, I wonder the value of some sort of module or micro module with input from the experts within all the institutions to improve understanding. Would that be a value, a kind of circular economy 101?
Definitely, I think modules of that sort would be very helpful for sure. And I think it's important that they do draw in the range of sources of knowledge and expertise, most definitely. And I think it would be great if we could establish ones that are kind of standard and widely available across institutions. I think that can present practical challenges, so I wouldn't constrain that idea to trying to create the one that everybody shares. But I think we should promote the establishment of suitable modules across institutions, with wide input where possible. Would probably be my take on that, just from personal experience of the additional challenges that come with trying to actually develop a directly collaborative and shared module. But certainly it's worth striving towards, but I think we shouldn't let the kind of perfect get in the way of the very good, shall we say.
Absolutely. Samantha, talk a little bit more. You mentioned procurement, and it's something that you clearly feel very strongly about. Can you talk a little bit more about that? And the question of the kind of prioritization of the greening of procurement by universities and purchasing habits right across the campus.
I can. So I guess we do a full carbon footprint for the university, a scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3, looking at all of our impacts across our carbon emissions. And by far, the largest emissions are coming from procurement. So we have maybe 20% of our emissions comes from our energy. So our gas and our electricity for the entire campus is about 20%. We've got about 25-30% in staff and student commuting, but it's closer on 50% coming in under procurement. So for instance, waste going out on the other end is less than 1% of the impact. So dealing with the waste part, and that is across all of the, and we have zero waste to landfill, but looking at all of the various, whether it's going to SRF, whether it's going to recycled, whether it's going to municipal waste, it's all less than 1% of our carbon emissions. So dealing with that procurement side is really where we need to, not looking at the mitigation change, but that adaptation change, that adaptation of education and how we change the system from where we currently are. And it is, for the first instance, I would say we need to just demonstrate the scale of the challenge that's going to be needed. Because, for instance, we are required to balance our financial books. And to balance our financial books, we have so much money from government, we have so much money, for instance, from campus companies or other resources that are coming in. And then we have money coming in from student fees. So whether that's international students or whatever. But if we're being required, because we're underfunded as a sector, to gain more international students, then those more international students will increase our emissions. Where on one side we've been asked to reduce our emissions, but it's really, really difficult within this confined system to make those changes independently. Sectorally, we should be demonstrating where all of these impacts are coming from, not just the procurement stuff, but all of our activities. So where we would be increasing our emissions because we're increasing international students, then we need to be calling that out to government to go, you can't have cake and eat it as well. We need to come up with a model that we're going to deliver the best education we can within the planetary boundaries or within the carbon budgets that we have, rather than trying to seek derogations to allow us to continue business as usual.
And Samantha, I know you mentioned, sorry, just to interrupt you there, but I know you mentioned, absolutely rising tide lifts all boats, and this is not a place for competition and then everyone should work together. But equally, I just wonder about the effectiveness of some sort of league table. So for example, if students were choosing to go to university and all things being equal, they could also have some assessment of this particular aspect of a university's operations. Or would that not be something that would be effective?
I guess my concern with that is the time frame. So if we listen to the science says that the fight for a livable planet will be won or lost in this decade. in this decade to 2030, we are either going to make the behavioral changes necessary to our business as usual models so that we leave a livable planet, or we won't. So it's not next generations or our current students' ability to make better decisions. It is ours or anybody who is in current positions of power or influence that will have to make those decisions to make those changes. Starting competition tables, and because what happens with competition is that people then want to get the result delivered first before they can share the information with everybody else. We need not to be competing on sustainability. It's just not a competition factor. It needs to be, we need to get everybody to delivering within a sustainable system, and there shouldn't be we shouldn't be leaving somebody behind. We need to bring everybody with us, and it's, you know, back to the EU, let's leave nobody behind. And so I'm not the biggest fan of using competition as that kind of a factor.
Okay, thank you. And a message there from Emma Kavanagh to everyone. Community Resources Network Ireland has a green and social procurement virtual trade fair that university staff can explore regionally. It's on Green and Social. There's a link there, .virtualeventspace.io. Tasman, can I ask you just briefly if you have anything to add to this? We have a question in about student accommodation being a huge aspect of student life. What opportunities exist to embed circularity into campus accommodation? Is there anything you could say about that?
Definitely, it's something that's very important to do. I mean, I guess, you know, we also need to make sure that student accommodation is abundant enough to accommodate the student population as part of the kind of grappling with the housing crisis. But yeah, no, and I think there are some schemes that are kicking in so that the things that one group of students leave behind in their accommodation can be picked up and used by the next group of students coming in, rather than having the units cleaned out and left empty for the next people coming in and so on. So I think there's a lot of room there also to trial a whole range of different initiatives. And as Sam sort of said, you know, universities are like small towns, small cities, with the exception that most people do leave for the night. But I guess the accommodation presents that other piece to the puzzle, you know, as people that are actually resident on campus 24/7, that gives you that opportunity to explore new kinds of initiatives.
Thank you. And Warren, I'll come to you just about another question here coming in about what's next. Are there plans in its next phase to widen the Campus as Living Labs initiative beyond IUA members to engage other further and higher education institutions to support system-wide collaboration, learning and impact, and lift all boats, as Samantha mentioned?
Yeah, well, I suppose the first thing to say was that the partnership was between the EPA and the IUA, and it was time stamped initially for the 2 years. I think really the future for it is that the IUA needs to consider what they would like this partnership or the Campus Living Lab idea to become. You know, what is the focus now for the next phase of that, and to really consider that, because there's so many different activities going on. And only a finite amount of resources and people and energy, etc., that there really needs to be a clear focus. And one way of looking at it is what is the big common issues across all of our environments here, and what can we really identify and really work together on. And I think that point about the sharing and the collaboration is absolutely central to the future of it. Extending it into the other non-IUA members, certainly I think the publication and the availability of the findings from it should be made available so that others can take the learnings as well. And I think that's really a conversation then for the IUA to have amongst its own members about extending it out to other non-IUA members as well.
One comment here: in UL, we are beginning to work with on-campus accommodation to create student-led sustainability committees to further investigate grassroots ways to improve circularity in these accommodations, including a workshop this evening on how students can be more sustainable within their own accommodation, featuring time to play the waste game. Thank you, Jack, for that. We're coming to the end of this session. I wanted to ask the three of you to just project forward and give us a vision for 2030 in the best case scenario. Samantha, as you have said, and it is so clear with the kind of news that we've had in the last few days about the urgency that we are in with regards to climate change, the climate crisis, and the nature crisis indeed as well. You know, all things going well and urgently well, what do you think the university sector could look like in 2030, having transformed itself? Can you give us a little bit of that vision, maybe starting with you, Samantha?
Wow, what is the vision of the higher education sector by 2030? That's not the easiest of questions or places to end with. I think it'll have to look much more collaboratively. So we will have to, as a sector, be working much more together to deliver sectoral change. There is no way of us doing this as individual institutions. We are going to have to look at, and I guess what I would see is policy development is our next steps that we have to look at, so that they will be joint policies, whether those policies are looking at business travel. So we are being required to address our business travel emissions. But that you can't have one institution making one set of rules and a different institution making different sets of rules, because then you create a competition risk between the organizations. So and there's many other demonstrations that, like Tasma was saying about the module for circular economy, or a module for sustainability, or training for climate leadership. There needs to be common messaging across all of our system. We need to have or ensure that our sector is not muddying the science, but is ensuring that the science is crystal clear and communicated really clearly to the general public, because we need to ensure that we can maintain societal cohesion and ensure that society is going to come with us as well as we go through the significant changes that are going to have to happen to meet the sustainable and biodiversity challenges.
Warren, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, just very quickly, I think 2030 is not that far away, so we need to be actually realistic in what can be achieved. You know, looking at my waste hat on, I think we spend a lot of time talking about recycling, and we need to really focus and shift the dial to generation, because generation is leakage from a circular system. And so we have to consider, certainly campuses do, in terms of their consumption habits and how they can actually significantly reduce their waste generation currently there, and what steps they can make upstream. So whether that's better procurement, whether it's, you know, just removing certain things like single-use items from campuses completely. It's those types of measures that we need to see to really tackle waste generation. And one last thing just to consider, it would be great to see these campuses, certainly the big IUA members, having on-site reuse and repair hubs that were actually used by students, staff, and building maintenance, so that we'd have that live ecosystem as at the heart of the campus. And
a last word with you, Tasman.
Yes, no, thanks. I completely agree with the comments that Sam and Warren have made there. So I think that visibility on campus is important. That you walk onto the campus and it's clear that there are those kinds of repair centres and simple things like drinking water taps, segregated waste, and also sustainability information signage about the important changes that are behind the scenes. I think the bigger things are happening perhaps in relation to the way buildings are operating and energy is being kind of generated and used. So that and so also that everyone on the campus develops an understanding of and a commitment to sustainability and its wider uptake through engagement and communication with wider society. So I think ultimately, to kind of cut things short, I guess, given the kind of time, I think it's the people going, as well as the kind of communication skills of the academics and other staff on the university across a wide range of media and topics and approaches. I think the graduates going out into the wide world, with a vision for a more sustainable future and the skills and the will to contribute in whatever way they can, I think ultimately is going to be very important, notwithstanding Sam's comments there about the urgency of the situation and the need to be moving sort of even more quickly than that.
Well, thank you all so much, Samantha, Tasman, Warren, and also Catherine Higgins, for giving your time this afternoon. It's been a really interesting discussion and interesting talks at the start as well. And I hope everyone who's logged on got something out of it too. And thank you all for your questions. I would like to also acknowledge the work of Louise Griffin, who led the project for IUA as well. And while this webinar marks the end of the IUA EPA Campus Living project, it does not mark the end of universities working to embed circular economy principles. They will continue to tackle the climate crisis and the nature crisis through education, research, and practice. This is, as they say, a starting point, very much not an ending point. But thank you all so much. Thank you to all the guests as well, all the people watching. I hope you all have a very good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much.